What if instead of staying at 8, Carolina is thinking about trading up to number 3 with the Giants after they sign Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston? And if they're going up to number 3, who are they getting? Maybe it's Abdul Carter. I'll answer that question among other listener questions on this weekly Friday mailbag edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, because on Fridays like today throughout the entirety of the offseason, I'm right here answering your weekly Friday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter or at me over on Blue Sky to get your questions in for next week's edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We're back once again for another edition of the weekly Friday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. We are counting down the days to the 2025 NFL Draft, April 24th on that Thursday night. The Panthers have a big decision to make at 8th overall. And speaking of that decision, might they think about trading up earlier into the draft with a particular team up in New York City? Technically, they play in New Jersey, but we'll talk about that here as Dade and Devin both have questions about trading up for one particular player. Dade says if Cam Ward goes number 1 to the Titans and Travis Hunter goes number 2 to the Browns and the Giants don't like Shedeur Sanders at 3 and want more capital, do the Panthers move up for Abdul Carter? Devin asks, how would you feel about instead of trading down, which I talked about earlier this week, the Panthers trade up for Abdul Carter? So two different people wanting the Panthers to potentially trade up to get Abdul Carter. And to do that, it's going to maybe take the Panthers getting up to 3, if not up to 2 with Cleveland. I have seen Daniel Jeremiah, Pearce Jr., Matt Miller, and all the recent mock drafts in the last week, all having Abdul Carter going 2nd overall to the Cleveland Browns. So unless Carolina right now is trading up to number 2, they're probably not getting Abdul Carter based off of all that has been mocked almost a month away from the draft, or I guess less than a month away from the draft. Now, Mike Tannenbaum, he did his own mock draft for whatever reason on ESPN.com, and he is the only person I saw that has the above scenario that Dade brought up, with Cam Ward going number 1 to the Titans, Travis Hunter going number 2 to the Browns. Then at 3, the Giants saying, no, actually, we're good. We have Russell. We have Jameis. We're good at quarterback, which is absurd if New York truly thinks they're good at quarterback with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston in 2025. And even if they add Shedeur Sanders in there, they're still not going to be good at quarterback. So maybe they do it. Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, their asses are getting fired this year probably, but this is their last chance to try to save their jobs for the long term. I do respect the fact that Mara, their owner, is willing to be a little bit more patient and give these guys another opportunity, but it's not going to work with Jameis, with Russell, or probably with Shedeur if they take him at 3. So is there a possibility that they look at the entirety of their roster and decide the best thing for them to do is to trade back, stay in the top 10, get more assets, bring in more players, and maybe that helps them in 2025 in an NFC East division that they have no shot in hell at winning? Maybe that's what they would want to do. And if that's the case, maybe Carolina then would be interested in trying to trade up and get Abdul Carter. But Matt Miller recently, I think it was actually this morning, there was some insight there about the draft that he was talking about Field Yates, Jordan Reed. He had this to say about the Giants, saying, I'm hearing quarterback even after signing Russell to a 1-year deal. A scout told me New York loves Shedeur. It's the worst kept secret in the league right now. According to that scout, the Giants had a presence at every Colorado home game this season. The Wilson and Jameis Winston deal shouldn't prevent the Giants from drafting a quarterback at number 3 if one of the top passers is available. But should Ward or Sanders both be off the board, the Giants will be a premier destination for Colorado's Travis Hunter, given the team's needs at wide receiver and corner. So it does not sound like the Giants are moving at all from 3rd overall. Now, if that's the possible scenario that Tannenbaum laid out there, where if somehow Cleveland decides, and it could happen, they decide that they want to get Shedeur and Cam Ward goes to the Titans, the top 2 guys are off the board there at quarterback. Then at 3, maybe the Giants go with Travis Hunter then, if that's what the intel that Matt Miller's getting. And after that, you're looking at it, Tannenbaum had at 5th overall Jacksonville taking Abdul Carter. If Abdul Carter's still available at 4 or at 5, does Carolina then trade up to do that? I want Abdul Carter to be a Carolina Panther, but I'm not interested in what it's going to cost Carolina to go out there and to get him. They're going to obviously do a pick swap. They're going to give up some future assets, maybe some picks in this year's draft. And yes, they have 9 of them, but only 3 in the top 75 and the top 100 period. It's not like they're I think 7th as far as the value of the picks that they have in this draft. I don't know, man. I think you're giving up way too much to go get him. Now, I do think he is the premium talent as far as edge rushers in this draft. But if you keep telling me from all the mocks that I've seen out there that Jalen Walker, who also can be a premium talent at edge and play off-ball linebacker, he can do both. If he's going to be there at 8, why are you giving up a ton, which it's always more on draft night if that's when they wait to do it. And maybe it'll be less if they do it prior to them, but it's not going to be cheap. Why are you giving up all that to go get him? And in hell, maybe you should just pay Brian Burns if that's the case. No, you're going to give the Giants more. I don't know. That would not make sense to me. As far as the player would make sense. What they're going to have to give up, no. So yeah, would love Abdul Carter to be on the Panthers, but if he's not there at 8, then he's not going to be a Carolina Panther, because I just don't see how that makes a lot of sense to trade up to go get him in this draft. Dan, he asks, given that it's going to take a couple of drafts before the Panthers are dangerous and the unlikelihood that they'll have this high of a pick next year, I think the question is, at 8, which player has the best chance at solving one of the Panthers' top 2 needs, edge and wide receiver 1, Walker at edge, or Tetero McMillan or Matthew Golden at wide receiver 1? Well, not so sure if Carolina won't be drafting the top 10 next year. Based off of all the recent history, they're likely to be in the top 10 than they're going to be drafting in one of those playoff slots this upcoming season. I do think that they've improved based off of free agency, but a long way to go before we can say confidently that they won't be in the top 10. And there were a lot of bad teams in the league this year. And just a couple of years ago, they were right there, chance to make the playoffs to win a division, and they're drafting the top 10. So they might be drafting in the top 10 next year. So we'll see. I wouldn't say there's an unlikelihood that they're going to have a top 10 pick again next year until I see this team actually win games throughout the regular season and not go through these massive, long, droughts of winning. So I'm not quite there with you, Dan, on that. We'll see. My hope is that they're not drafting in the top 10 next year, but I'm not going to say it's unlikely that they're drafting in the top 10 just based off of, what they've been since David Tepper bought this team. But as far as answering your question, I would think Jalen Walker, and you would already know that from watching and listening to this show, that I would think that he would have a better chance of solving their edge issues than either Tetero McMillan or Matthew Golden would have with their wide receiver 1 issues. I don't love the receivers in this draft class. I do think that McMillan is an outstanding talent based off of what I saw from the last 2 years at Arizona. Matthew Golden, somebody who really emerged late in the season at Texas and has had a really good lead up to the draft so far. We're still a couple of weeks away. I think he's talented. I just think that Walker would be at a spot Carolina needs more, and I do think that he has a better likelihood of fulfilling that than either McMillan or Golden. I would bet more on McMillan at this point in time than Matthew Golden, just heading into things, but I would go with Jalen Walker, which I've been pretty consistent about, and I'm imagining over the next couple of weeks of talking about the same subject over and over again, I'm going to continue to say that I think Jalen Walker should be the pick there at 8, especially if it's either edge or wide receiver 1, and those are your options. Yeah, I'm going to go with the Jalen Walker option, I think, every single time based off of all that I have as far as information right now and leading into the draft. All right. We'll take a quick pause, come back, and I'll answer more of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year. Talk about the Drake Bulldogs. They won. Their season's over. There's not really any underdogs remaining, as it's very clear that Duke's going to win the national championship. It's been clear for months now, so we'll see if that does not come to fruition, but I do think it will. And FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, when you win, when we win, we all get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, back here on the weekly Friday mailbag here on Locked On Panthers. Now over to Michael and Will, who, like our guys Dade and Devin, have a question about the same player. Michael asking, how would you feel if the Panthers drafted Jihaad Campbell from Alabama? We could trade back to get a second-round pick. I've watched his film, and I've sold on the fact that he might be the best defensive player in the draft outside of Abdul Carter. He could be the Luke Kuechly replacement the Panthers have been searching for all these years. Could Jihaad Campbell be an underrated destination for the Panthers? It may once again be a trade-back candidate. There's many holes on the defense, and a possible anchor such as himself could tie things together if the Panthers can manage to snag an edge rusher in the second. Well, let me say one thing. He's not the best defensive player outside of Abdul Carter, because that's ignoring that Travis Hunter exists. And I just think it's crazy that Travis Hunter is like not considered the best player in the draft. But it's very clear the guy was the best receiver in college, with the best defensive back in college, and won the Heisman. So yeah, I think he's the best player in this draft defensively, and hell, maybe even offensively. If you look at it, like, he was a dog the entire time in his career in college. Like, Cam Ward was really good at Incarnate Word, was good at Washington State, and took it to a whole nother level last year at Miami. Travis Hunter's just been that guy from day one. So I just don't know how anybody can think that there's any defensive or offensive player better than Travis Hunter in this draft class. But yes, Jihaad Campbell, there's been a lot of talk about him recently. I saw even in a mock draft a week ago, Daniel Jeremiah had him in the top 10 going 9th to the Saints, which would be a problem, obviously, for Carolina having to face him for the years to come. But other than that, I have seen him consistently in the late teens when he has been mocked by all the rest of these mock draft nerds out there across the NFL. So, yeah, it could be a good pick for Carolina. You look at things right now, they got Trevin Wallace coming back for his second year, expected to be a full-time starter, at least competing for the job. Josey Jewell coming back for another season. They got Christian Rozeboom coming out the career year out there in LA. He's coming into Carolina, and he's not quite sure what his role is going to be. So there's three guys that you know can play for you in a Jero Vero scheme, but you have to question, is there that top-tier off-ball linebacker talent on the roster right now? And I would say, hard to say yes to that. Maybe Wallace can be that down the road, but we'll see. So they could use a true replacement to Luke. They have not found that. I know Shaq has been a really good player, but Shaq Thompson was never going to be Luke Kuechly. And you would hope that with Trevin Wallace that he can produce at the level that Shaq was the last couple of years when he was healthy. And I think you got a pretty solid inside linebacker there, but not necessarily a Pro Bowl talent, which is fine. Moton has not been that, but he's been a really good player for Carolina throughout his tenure here in Charlotte. So yeah, I would be cool with Jihaad Campbell. I do think, based off of what you guys are saying and from what I've seen, it would require Carolina to want to trade back. And when trading back, I've thought more about getting an edge still, or if they want to get a receiver, maybe that would make sense as well, as we talked about that earlier this week. But if they do want to go linebacker, which all these mock draft people believe that Carolina's still focused on defense early, which I've seen with edge, not mainly being Jalen Walker at 8, seeing corner, like some guys like Trey Amos, who I've seen some buzz about him maybe going in the first round. Trey Amos from Mississippi, from Ole Miss. I think it was at Louisiana before that. But either way, trade back probably would be the likely scenario if they're going to take Jihaad Campbell in the first round. And then, as you guys are mentioning, maybe if that gives them a pick earlier on in the second round, then maybe they're able to, and I don't know all what everybody's picks are. I'm not looking at anything right now. I don't know off the top of my head. So we'll have to go back and look at that. Cool. If they can get an edge rusher in the second round, that's great. Supposedly a deep edge rusher class. So you could check that box off, get a linebacker as well. Or we could check both boxes by staying at 8 and taking Jalen Walker. But yeah, Jihaad Campbell, sure. Why not? And then also, let me read this thing because this is from Lance Zierlein. Just a breakdown of him from NFL Network or NFL.com. Campbell has the build and traits of an Alabama linebacker, but might need to upgrade in some areas. He doesn't play with early instincts or play recognition and is inconsistent in challenging blockers and leveraging his run fits. Campbell uses his speed and athleticism to help mitigate mistakes and get to the football at a relatively high rate. He's a rangy, consistent open field tackler who excels at third down, a fluid blitzer, and impressive cover talent. The elite traits and athletic talent will be tantalizing, but the way to utilize him may be as a full-time 3-4 rush linebacker. Interesting, where he can play more proactively instead of reactively as an off-ball linebacker. So he would fit the scheme, but that's exactly what Carolina decides to do with him. But Jihaad Campbell, maybe makes sense for Carolina. We'll see. Christopher, I want to know what you think about drafting James Pearce Jr., especially after his comments during the Tennessee Pro Day. Well, that was a couple weeks ago. Where I guess he was addressing the character issues, which what are those? All I know is from everything I've read about James Pearce Jr., he wasn't involved in some street race that led to a teammate and a staffer dying. He wasn't allegedly someone who handed a murder weapon to somebody. So, what are the character issues? No one's pointed those out to me. That's just thing I don't really understand when they say character issues. Okay, well, is he wrapped up in that kind of stuff or not? Because there's plenty of guys, I think you know who I'm talking about when I mentioned those last two things. Like, was he stealing crab legs and accused of rape? Was he an accessory to murder? Like, no. Okay, so then what's the issue here? What are the character issues? That's just the thing that's so annoying about this time of the year is character issues. What are they? I don't know, but he said, quote, "I'm a great guy. I'm a great teammate, a great player. I'm a people person. I've got a good heart." I don't know. Maybe I'm just defending him because he's a Charlotte guy. I defend all these guys because this is the thing about the process that I hate the most is that all they're trying to do is tear them down. I mean, the Lance Zierlein thing I just read to y'all is basically just saying how Campbell does all these things wrong. Oh, but yeah, by the way, there's one thing he does well. And then, but yeah, he's still, not sure he's going to be that good of a player. It's like, okay, cool. Thanks for the insight there, buddy, because that's exactly the warm and fuzzies that I need for a Friday morning when breaking down prospects. Sure. I mean, that's kind of my answer. Like, sure, with all these guys. Yeah, why not? Like, they need an edge rusher. He's from the hometown. That's irrelevant, quite honestly, to their decision-making and should be irrelevant to their decision-making when deciding to bring a player in, but it doesn't help or hurt, rather, from a marketing standpoint, even though I'm sure most of these people have no idea who James Pearce Jr. is. They bring him to Carolina. It would be cool. I mean, he was outstanding his sophomore year. Last year, I think left a lot to be desired. He still was getting after the passer and was getting some pressure, just didn't have the sack numbers that he had the prior season. And I don't think you really saw that jump into like an all-American, just a can't miss like top 10 prospect, which is what I believe a lot of people thought he was going to be heading into the season. This past fall, I mean, that Tennessee defensive line all across the board was great. Like, he was around a lot of good talent, and it's not like he had to do everything. So I think he's a good player. I think it'd be a cool story, obviously, and character issues, I don't know what those are, so not really concerned about him. And here's their line again, just to give you all some more insight as far as James Pearce Jr. goes. Pearce is a tight-hipped, linear pass rusher with explosive takeoffs and good speed to power, but a lack of bend to flatten at the top. His high pressure rate is partially derived from an instinctive feel for positioning, allowing him to work around protection for quick wins into the pocket, which sounds like a positive to me. He's very long but narrow through the hips, so the build out of his frame might be limited. Pearce knows how to play around blocks and has a speed to close and tackle but his base is naturally narrow and lacks bend. He'll need to improve his strength and technique as an NFL run defender. Despite those concerns, Pearce's length, twitch, and rust production create a higher ceiling. To me, when watching him, he kind of would remind me of a Brian Burns from Burns' time at Florida State. And, the run defense, that's a question for Burns still to this day. Now he's in New York, and that's a question for Pearce coming in to the league. Now, Burns, no one questioned his character for whatever reason. People are questioning James Pearce Jr.'s character. For what reason? I don't know. They haven't listed the reasons, and nor will they. They're just going to put that out there, character issues, and try to destroy this young man's opportunity to get drafted high, which is crazy to me, but that's the NFL draft every single year, and we're going to keep doing it for whatever reason. But yeah, cool. I'm into it. We'll see if it happens. If not, I think Carolina will probably be okay either way. All right, take a quick pause, come back and answer the rest of your weekly Friday mailbag questions right here on Locked On Panthers. All right, a couple of more questions here on the weekly Friday mailbag. Again, at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get the questions into me next week, or at me on Blue Sky to get those questions in as well. Dylan, he asked, do the Panthers need to exceed their win total from last year for Canales and Morgan to keep their jobs? I like this duo and want them to stick around, but I worry about Tepper's patience. Well, I don't think that Dan Morgan or Dave Canales are on any sort of hot seat going into 2025. They won 5 games last year. It got off to the worst start possible with the way that Bryce Young played and the team being 0-2, and then they ended up being 1-7, and that was not ideal. They were able to win that game against New Orleans. They were able to also win against Giants in Munich, and they played Kansas City tough, played Tampa tough the first time around, played Philadelphia tough in those first 3 weeks post-bye, and then laid an egg against Dallas. The bounce back the next week, beat Arizona, laid another egg against Tampa, and then played really well to close out the season against Atlanta in a game that the Falcons had to have heading into things in order to go to the playoffs. So I do think that they ended the season on a positive note, going 4-5 in the final 9 weeks. And really the most important thing was what Bryce Young looked like. And if you bring in Canales and you bring in Morgan, and they weren't able to add pieces around Bryce, so he was able to do Dan Morgan was with the offensive line and receiving core. And then if you weren't able to coach him up, which looked like it wasn't going to really happen, and that Dave Canales didn't seem to be that interested. At least he wasn't willing to tell us what was going on, and the whole messaging around Dalton coming in and Bryce being benched and when Bryce getting the opportunity, I still think was poorly handled by Dave Canales. But at the end of the day, it all worked out based off of how Bryce played, and I guess some of the things happening behind the scenes and him maturing into that role and understanding what was expected of him as a franchise quarterback, at least a hopeful franchise quarterback. Certainly is not a franchise quarterback at this point in time. He's a starting quarterback. One day, maybe going to be a true franchise in Carolina, as evidenced by on Wednesday when Joe Person asked Brant Tillis about where the contract structures, keeping Bryce in mind with potential extension. He said, we're not quite there yet. TBD on whether that's going to happen. So he's still got a lot to prove this upcoming season. And I do think his development and what he's able to do will reflect upon Dave Canales and Dan Morgan and their ability to be able to build a winner in Carolina. So if they go out there and they only win 5 games again next year, I don't think it's going to leave anybody that encouraged heading into 2026. It will certainly make it a make or break season for Bryce, for Dave, for maybe Dan, I would think, possibly. Probably more Dave than Dan in that scenario. But either way, I don't look at this as if they don't win 6 games. Like if they only win 6 games next year, is that great? Like I would hope that they could at least get to like 7 or 8 this fall and have that upward trajectory heading into 2026. Like that's what I would like to see at minimum for them. And maybe that's the best case scenario. Who knows? I don't know what the roster looks like at this point in time fully. So no, I don't think that they need to exceed their win total. But it would help their case moving forward into confidence that the owner has in them and also that the fan base has in them. As I saw, season tickets once again were raised for one of the worst teams annually in the NFL nowadays, which is crazy to me, but that's just how the world works, and y'all are going to keep paying it. So he's going to keep raising it. Logan, last question. What do you think about the Panthers taking Jarquez Hunter from Auburn in the 4th round this coming NFL draft? Oh, yeah, maybe. Matt Miller had the Panthers taking Damian Martinez in his latest 7-round mock draft with pick 163. That comes in the 5th round. Damian Martinez was at Oregon State for a couple of years, then got bought off their roster and played at Miami last year. And, well, who can blame them? The lack of leadership across the board in college athletics made Oregon State no longer a power conference team because they're located in Corvallis, Oregon, and they don't have Phil Knight as an alum like Oregon does, which is the only reason that the Ducks are where they're at and the Beavs are where they're at, which is sad state of college athletics. But going back to Jarquez Hunter, yeah, I mean, good player at Auburn. Only 3 other guys have more rushing yards than his 3,300 in his career down there on the Plains. That's, of course, Bo Jackson, who has like 1,000 more yards than him. My all-time favorite Auburn Tiger, Cadillac Williams, who was outstanding. Then another guy who played in the 70s for Auburn. I think Hunter's a good player. Ran for 1,200 yards last year. Really good in that offense, and an offense that really could not throw the ball, even though they had a ton of great receivers, mainly because the quarterback was terrible there at Auburn. But yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to, like, does Carolina want to draft a running back? I know Damian Parson of Locked On NFL Draft was on with us a couple weeks ago, and he talked about he thinks Carolina's draft a running back. You got Rico Dowdle for 1 year, and that's a situation where he's probably only going to be here for a year, especially if he plays well again. Maybe his market's better than what it was this offseason. Chuba, he's under contract for the next coming years. And you stop Jonathan Brooks. And I don't know how they feel about Jonathan Brooks and what their plan will be for him, more likely in 2026 and this upcoming season in 2025. That will have a pretty big bearing. But right now, I don't really know if you need to get a running back at this point in time. You got 2 guys that you really want to stick with. Maybe you can go find some bet on the street like Mike Boone, who they had last year, and then maybe find somebody else. But I don't know, 4th round, if that makes sense. 5th round, 6th round. Well, they don't have a 6th round pick. 5th round, where they have 3 picks. Sure. I mean, I'm not against Jarquez Hunter. So yeah, we'll see what happens. All right. That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, powered of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all, subscribe or follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky, Julian Council. Get your weekly Friday mailbag questions in for next week. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding on Monday. Going to talk to Keith Sanchez, one of the other hosts of the Locked On NFL Draft, and get his thoughts on the Panthers' options heading into the draft here in 2025. Coming up on Monday on the Locked On Panthers.